I'm ready if you are.
Ready when you are.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance. I'm your hostess, Alacia Singer.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody doing? How are you today, Lacey?
Excellent. Man, the news this week, Duncan.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe we should just jump right into it because I feel like everyone lost their minds this week or something.
Yeah, so we're going to cover some news, and then we're going to cover some stuff about the student loan stuff that's going on. And then the thing about the news this week was it had a theme, and the theme was racism. So we're going to open with our favorite, Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative from Georgia. And Marjorie,
if you're watching, which you're probably not because you don't really lean the correct direction to be interested in us, but if you are, look into my eyes. Stop talking. Just stop.
Zip it.
All right.
All right.
Well,
so
let's see. What did she do this time?
She's going to defend the whites. That's what she's going to do for us. Because nobody appreciates the whites.
To be given a chance to live as free Americans instead of murder. You think this is funny, Miss Batalnik? Is this funny to you? Is babies being murdered in the womb funny to you? Because you're smirking and laughing at me right now.
What's not funny are the black people.
So here's the setup.
Babies being murdered in the womb, acting like there's serial murderers running around, attacking and stabbing pregnant women against their will or something. Like, what?
So I dropped the ball here. I should have set this up. So so there's a couple segments we're going to see here. So she's at this hearing. The hearing is on, I think it's on white supremacy, right? Or they're talking about different kinds of terroristic sort of violence, right? Of course, white supremacists, white nationalists commit the most terror in the United States. They kill the most people of any sort of group like that, right? So they are considered a terrorist group by the FBI. She's trying to say, well, it's not as bad as, say, people illegally having abortions because they're killing the babies in the womb. That's what her comparison was here. And the woman who studies white supremacy and that sort of terroristic crime is laughing while she's saying it. Probably because a lot of the other people are kind of chuckling too, because it's a stupid comparison, right? I mean,
oh gosh.
So
I stand by my opinion that she just needs to stop talking.
Well, let's see the woman's response.
She's not going to stop talking, so let's hear what she's not going to stop talking about.
Well, let's hear the woman's response, and her response is pretty good.
Laughing at me right now.
What's not funny are the black people and Hispanic people and Jewish people and Muslim people who have been murdered in synagogue, in church, in supermarkets, in mosques by white supremacists.
It was a House hearing on extremism, and after Marjorie Taylor Greene got corrected and laughed at, she went into an extreme verbal tailspin.
Are you aware that all colored people are murdered? That is a fact. That every single color person has been murdered.
What is happening here? I don't even know if I can respond to it because
Lacey, you're white. You've been murdered, right? All colored people have been murdered. People of every color have been murdered, right? Every colored person's been murdered. So, by that standing, we should all have been murdered.
What point does she even think she's trying to make?
She's
obviously misspeaking, but what does she think she's even saying?
She's trying to say you are singling out white supremacy as a problem when other people get murdered too, and there are other problems. It's literally the bank robber going up to the court and them saying, well, we're going to find you guilty of bank robbery. Do you have anything to say on your behalf? And the bank robber says, well, what about that bank robber? What about that? What about Bonnie and Clyde, man? What about, It's like, geez.
That's what she thinks she's saying, but she's not doing a very good job of.
But even then, it's a stupid argument.
It's a stupid argument, even if you can understand it, but you can't even understand her stupid argument. Like, I didn't even know what she was saying.
Right.
And I do have an advanced degree.
Yeah. So
I should be able to follow super simple English, but I couldn't even understand what she was talking about.
yeah, she's trying to dodge the issue, but then she's defending the whites. The white supremacists are not as bad. That's the premise of the whole argument. That's why it's so ridiculous, right? So we're gonna watch some more of this because this just gets fucking nuts. So this guy, I forget what his name is, but he's gonna cover this a little bit.
That's not unusual.
We've all been murdered.
See,
What?
the same thing.
Come on, Mark. Spit it out.
It's not just that people of color are murdered. White people are murdered too. Murder is not just for minorities. That may be a shock to you because you seem to dive deeply into all kinds of misinformation and seem to be uninformed yourself. And if you apparently care about human rights and you care about studying extremism, let's have a little talk about extremism, shall we? I think that's important because that's what this hearing is all about. I'd like to inform you, or maybe you don't know, maybe you do know, I doubt it. You mostly care about white supremacists and white-wing extremism. But there's quite a pattern of left-wing violent protests on college campuses today. Miss Gaines here was a victim of it. Do you support what they did to Miss Gaines? These trans terrorists chasing her into a room? Do you support that?
So here's the thing. She's comparing a white supremacist shooting up a predominantly black grocery store, or a white supremacist shooting up a gay club, or a white supremacist shooting up a synagogue, right? These things happen all the time in the United States. Hundreds of these happen a year, where white supremacists will shoot up a bunch of black people, Hispanic people, Sikhs, Muslims, whatever, right? She's saying, well, it's equal on the left because some trans people chased a woman into a room. How much violence are trans people committing for the sake of being transgender?
Well, okay, here's what I'm going to offer. This is more, my logic and deductive reason than anything, but I feel like if there was a lot of violence coming from the trans community on a large scale, there would be headlines literally everywhere about it.
Well, but she's saying
the fact that we're not hearing about a whole bunch probably means that it's not happening a whole bunch.
Well, that's the other thing.
Which means it's kind of a silly comparison.
Well, that's the other thing is how many black extremist groups are going around killing people or have members that are going around killing people in the name of black extremism. It doesn't happen that often. It's rare, right? I'm part Japanese. How many Japanese people in America are running around saying we're superior, long live Hirohito, and shooting up a bunch of round eyes at the local farmers market.
Man. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, but I feel like if I heard that, it would just be puzzled.
You'd be like, "There's no fucking way that happened."
It doesn't really happen,
But what's funny is Hirohito was World War II, Nazism was World War II, but white supremacy still exists. So you don't see a lot of Japanese military extremism, not even in Japan. But I just think it's funny because she's trying to compare these like they're apples and apples when they're apples and oranges.
Right. Well, I mean, and she's not even thinking in scale. Like, she wants to compare these things, but the scale is out of proportion. So one instance that happened in a particular community that's kind of an outlier,
right? And
you want to compare it to something that unfortunately happens with a really scary amount of regularity in another, you know?
Well, that's my point. It's like a serial killer who's killed 14 people, right? You can't sit there and go, well, that's equal to this guy who got drunk and killed somebody. Those are two very different crimes. One is intent, and one is, serious psychopathy, whatever. And the other is a person being reckless and stupid. I'm not saying that they're not both, well, the one's not murder, it's, manslaughter, or whatever, negligent homicide. But at the same time, I mean, they're both killers, but there's a little bit of a difference. There's a nuance, right? There's context. Well, here's the deal, though. She forgets she's talking to the government expert on this. That's why they called this woman. And that's why the woman's laughing, because this is so stupid. And so to watch the woman respond to all this, because it's just such a pointless charade for her to try and downplay white supremacy. But that's what she's trying to do.
Their movement.
I am absolutely sorry that Ms. Gaines felt threatened and unsafe while she was on a college campus, and that's not acceptable. But again, the statistics tell us that when it comes to politically motivated violence in 2022, every single murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Every single murder in America was committed by a right-wing extremist?
Every single politically motivated murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Are you sure about that?
I am.
Are you aware that the Tennessee shooter just recently identified as a man and she was a biological woman? Was she a right-wing extremist as well?
Young lady's time has expired. I'll allow the witness to answer the question.
So that was a shooting that happened in 2023. There is no evidence as to what ideology motivated that shooting. And what we do know is that cisgender males are responsible for the vast majority of mass shootings in this country.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a cisgender
Cisgender
male is. There's only two genders. It's male and female. That would be, so no one knows what a cisgender male is.
So,
No one. No, you don't.
You
what a
don't
cisgender
know.
Male is.
you don't know shit.
Don't drag all the rest of us into the do know what this means.
But I love that. 2022, all the politically motivated murders that we've recorded, that we know of, right, in the United States, committed by white supremacists. And when she's saying cisgender, she means men who were born male and predominantly heterosexual. So, like, I'm a cisgendered male. I was born male. I identify as male. I'm also heterosexual. That's one thing. I mean, there are three different things. And as far as there's only two genders, I don't know. Look up the American Psychological Association. They have 7 base genders. And those don't even include all. That's just the bases they start with.
Right. Okay, so regardless, I'm not saying I don't agree with you. I do agree with you.
Oh,
but
yeah.
regardless of that part of it, even just like completely setting that part of it aside,
Yeah.
she's just spewing out ignorance because she doesn't know what cisgender means. Therefore, she's automatically trying to fight back against it when actually there's nothing to fight against.
Right.
That.
Plus
she's
the
just spewing nonsense.
Plus, the comparison was ridiculous. So the woman saying in 2022 that was the case, right? That might not be the case in 2023, but that was the case in 2022. And all the data has been...
And we're grabbing their actual data, statistical
right.
data from.
Well, we haven't compiled all the data for 2023 because it's not over yet.
Right. Data is still happening.
Right. So she's talking about in 2022 that was the case. And she's like, well, in this one mass shooting that happened in Tennessee, it was a transgender man. Okay? And the woman's like, okay, but that happened in 2023, not 2022, right? Which is what I'm here to testify about. And it wasn't politically motivated that we know of. So I'm talking about politically motivated murders. You asked me to testify in this one thing, and now you're asking me about 50 other things. You know? It's like asking somebody, it's like, I want you to come over here and, you know, try my ice cream and tell me if it's any good. And then you start throwing fucking dishes in their face, going, here, try the pasta, try the steak. And they're like, yeah, I'm here for the freaking ice cream, dude. I didn't come here I don't know anything about the steak. So anyway, so this moves on and she gets into a little bit of a debate outside of the house. And she gets a debate with another representative named Jamal Bowman. And then this kind of goes back on her, and she ends up, the Democrats start calling her a racist for pretty good reason. especially after this whole debacle where she just tried to defend white supremacy.
Marjorie, stop talking.
I know. So check this out. This is CNN.
Democrats accusing Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of being racist for saying she feels threatened by Congressman Jamal Bowman, who is black. Congresswoman Cori Bush tweeting, quote, she doesn't feel safe around a black man is what a racist would say. Congresswoman Madeline Dean, quote, Representative Greene is the aggressor here, pushing an age-old racist trope used to target and discredit black men. Governor Gavin Newsom of California, everyone should call this out for what it is, blatant racism. Now, they're all referring to these remarks by Congresswoman Greene.
Yeah, I love this.
On the Capitol steps yesterday, he was the one that approached me. Even CNN reported that. Yelling, shouting, raising his voice. He has aggressive, his physical mannerisms are aggressive. I think there's a lot of concern about Jamal Bowman. So, and I am concerned about it. I feel threatened by him. I am very concerned about Jamal Bowman, and he's someone that people should watch.
So, Jamal Bowman comes out, talks to her. She does a whole big thing later on about how
Was he yelling and screaming at her?
well, let's skip to the tape, huh? Hang on one second.
I mean, I feel like proof is in the pudding, because I gotta say, if anybody actually, comes yelling at me and they're bigger than me, I might feel threatened. So is he yelling at her?
No, well, let's go to the tape.
If they're gonna show it, let's watch it.
All right, here we go.
While Santos was speaking to reporters. Here's the moment.
Here's.
You gotta kick him out! You gotta kick him! The party has to kick him out! He's embarrassing y'all! He's embarrassing y'all! If he's running for what? You gotta get him out! Expose him! You gotta expose. Save the party! The party's hanging by a thread! The party is hanging. Save America! Save the children! Do something about guns! Come on! Invest in education! The borders when Trump left.
Hey,
What are
where
you
are all the
talking
kids?
about?
Where are all the migrant
What
children?
kids?
You guys
We're
lost
accepting
them.
them. We love
No,
them.
you've lost
We
them.
love the migrant children. Listen, I
Jamal,
need you to save
not very
the party.
smart. You should pay attention.
Save the party.
So it ends with oh, why am I blurry? Little camera, what's going on? Hang on, let me see if I can fix that. There we go. So the whole thing ends with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez telling Jamal Bowman, "She ain't worth it, man. Just leave." And then he that's when he starts laughing and he leaves. So, do you feel like she was attacked or threatened, or that he's dangerous to her by that interaction?
No, not based on that interaction. I was trying to put myself in her shoes, not her little right-wing shoes, but just her shoes as, being a female out there, and I'm not trying to be sexist there necessarily, but a lot of times it can be a situation where I at least am a little easier to physically intimidate, because I'm not a particularly large woman,
Well, she's small
so,
too, but
feeling physically intimidated by people, especially if they're yelling at you and have aggressive, body language toward you, is a real thing. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't see him as exhibiting any aggressive body language toward her, and he wasn't in her bubble at all.
If this,
I was expecting him to be doing the thing where he was kind of like getting in her bubble and yelling at her and like putting his hand in her face or whatever, and he wasn't doing any of that.
no, and he didn't attack her personally. He didn't say anything negative about her, but she immediately took that, went to a press conference and said that he was threatening her, that he was dangerous, blah, 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 that he needs to be looked at, that she might file an impeachment charge against him and all this shit, right? And it's the whole thing where they were like, this is the same thing about the black guy says hi to the white woman and he gets hung. I mean, this is like To Kill a Mockingbird shit, where we know the black guy's innocent, but and the girl's lying, but they convict him anyway. That's what she's trying to do here. It's the whole we talked about the Emmett Till shit, where Emmett Till went to visit family in the South, and I think what happened was he was in a store and he saw a white woman in a store, but he's from the city where it was more acceptable to talk, and he just told her that she looked attractive, or I think he said she looked like an angel or something nice like that. He was only like 14 or 15, and she said that he attacked her, and then I guess friends of hers chased him down, beat the hell out of him.
He's an angel something. I don't know what kind of angel that is, but it's not a good kind of angel, that's for sure.
No, but they lynched him and they mutilated his body pretty badly. I mean, it was, and so that's part of what kicked off a lot of the civil rights stuff, is that when they did his funeral, his mother demanded to be an open casket, even though his face was all mutilated and he looked like hell. And so they had all these photos, and it's like, this could be your kid, right? And that kicked off a lot of the hate and the anger of the civil rights movement. But that's the kind of thing where it's like, I'm just sitting there, it's like, what the fuck is she doing? She's trying to stir that up against him, while she's at the same time saying white supremacy is not really that big of an issue. So there's that. So everybody's favorite, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'd say she should shut up, but she's kind of making the point for everybody. You know, if you're a Republican, you either are like this or you support it and vote for it. There's nothing else we can say.
I mean, when I think about all the people who voted that in, I mean, I understand different ideologies or whatever, and that you're more conservative and you're going to vote in a conservative, but like, she's really something. And if you're voting for that, I wonder if people who voted for her realize just like how out there she was when they voted for her. I mean, like, did you know you were voting for bonkers? Or did she come across as like conservative but not insane, and then she got in and then suddenly it was like whirlwind bonkers?
No, I don't know how. That's a real conservative district she's in. She's a carpetbagger, so she moved there right before the elections, just so she could get elected.
Yeah, so probably not a lot of people had.
No, they probably just ticked whoever the Republican was. So
yeah. They probably didn't have like a whole lot of perspective on her.
Right. Well, speaking of other politicians from the progressive South, Ron DeSantis, whose numbers are in the hole. Anyway, Ronnie's had a rough week. First thing that happened, he passed a really draconian immigration bill, and the immigrants just didn't show up to work after they decided to pass this bill. And here's some footage of immigrants not showing up to work.
There's like less than 20 people working today. Usually there's about 100. And it's really interesting. I'm wondering how they're going to get this project done with.
So this is all in Florida.
Undocumented workers.
So the truckers gave a strike, so there was no groceries.
Y andamos todos agüitados porque no llevan una persona a trabajar, ni alma se mira.
Look at all the people picking those crops.
9:30 de la mañana esto estuviera lleno de gente, de muchos trabajadores latinos inmigrantes, y no hay nada.
Still building a housing development.
No hay trabajadores. Venimos a checar a Miami a ver si es cierto y es verdad, mira. No hay trabajadores, todo vacío.
Ahora cuénteme, miren, los que quedan están sentados. Porque mira cómo está el trabajo ahí, miren. Y los que quedan están sentados. Esos son los que tienen papeles. Los que quedan.
So like the one lone guy.
Nunca había visto yo a una gente sentada ahí.
El del rey.
Oh man. For as much as they spit on immigrants, they forget how much this country is built on the backs of immigrants.
Everyone wants to complain about it, but the truth of the matter is a lot of people that are documented do not go out for those jobs. It's labor that needs to be done but a lot of documented America is not putting in for that type of work.
Part of it is because it's very low paying, it's very heavy manual labor, and two, with a lot of these guys that are doing that kind of labor or that need that kind of labor, they don't have a lot of money for employees, so they can't afford to pay people a fair wage. So immigrants will take those jobs because they'll do them for 6 months or a year, and then they'll go home or send the money home, and that's how they support their families back where they live. So that's just one of those deals. So the immigration law that goes through in July here, but they passed it, and then the truckers went on strike, the farm workers went on strike, the construction workers went on strike. I don't know if you ever watched what was that? I love that show, Kitchen Nightmares. Gordon Ramsay, the chef. I like his stuff, but he talks about I've worked with Hispanic and Mexicans and Nicaraguans and Venezuelans and South Americans. He's like, I work with those people all the time. They're the backbone of the freaking American restaurant industry. You don't get your pasta without it. You don't get your pizza, without immigration workers willing to take those minimum wage jobs and work those kinds of hours. So here's what happened with the law. They're going to break this down here on MSNBC with, I think it's Joyce Reed, and she's going to talk to someone about this that's going to explain this a little bit better.
Andrea Reyes, an immigration attorney in Florida. And I will note for you, Ms. Reyes, that the exception to being able to transport undocumented migrants is the governor, who has been authorized by this law to fly migrants from Texas, whom he's brought into the state and put on planes and flown them to all sorts of blue states. So he gets to do it. Oh,
that's another thing. So Ron DeSantis, one of the things he's famous for is he thought this was really funny, and it would troll the left, is they lied to a bunch of immigrants, undocumented immigrants in Florida, and told them they'd get them work and visas and all this stuff. And these people then took the risk, left their families, and they put these people on planes, and then they flew them to like Martha's Vineyard and then different really blue areas of the country, thinking, and just left them there, just ditched them there with no money, nothing, thinking, oh yeah, you deal with them liberals if you like them so much. And what happened was we dealt with it. We got them into the process of immigration. We got them back to their families. It was all taken care of. And so he ended up looking like a jackass through the whole problem, where it's like, well, dude, if you're dumping them off, and you think,
well, okay, yeah, we will do something.
Yeah, we'll take care of it. There's actually systems in place to handle this. You just don't want to do them.
Right.
And he thought that was funny, but it's odd because it's literally kidnapping. If I lie to you and put you on a plane and ditch you somewhere, I literally kidnapped you.
Word for that? Don't they call that trafficking?
Yeah, human trafficking. It's within the United States, but that was her point. Is he made a law about human trafficking or trafficking immigrants, but apparently that law doesn't apply to him because he does it all the time now, and he thinks it's fun.
Apparently, he gets to do as much trafficking of people as he wants to.
Absolutely. So anyway, I want to hear this lawyer because she's actually she's spot on this whole thing.
The impact of this law before it even goes into effect in July.
Thank you for having me. So right now we are already seeing basically the start of what's going to likely be a mass exodus of immigrants out of the state of Florida. And we understand that in the state of Florida, we are 21% of the state is populated by immigrants. And so when you have a state where 35% of entrepreneurs are immigrants, contributing a whopping $8.1 billion in total income to the state of Florida, when you have over 21% of the populations being foreign born, where you have over 500,000 U.S. citizens living with at least one undocumented family member in their home in a mixed status environment. When you have a state that is run by immigrants in the industries of crop production, agriculture, construction, roofing, taxi drivers, and maids and housekeepings, right? When you have a state that is run so much by immigrants, To say that this bill is going to affect nearly all residents, families, and businesses in the state is really a terrifying fact.
And and it's interesting because
she hits a couple big points there. 1 out of 5 people in Florida is an immigrant. 1 out of 5. Think about that. And half the people in Florida are living with an immigrant. Right? So basically, you just alienated the whole fucking state.
And you know what? We don't have stats on this, but can we just assume if that many people either are an immigrant or living with one, that even the people who are not in either category probably have friends, co-workers, neighbors, that they all probably have decent relationships with, at least some of them.
Yeah, boyfriends, girlfriends. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, you're touched by it everywhere. I mean, it's just how it is. So to sit there and go, well, no, we're going to try and push these.
Best friend and their family or whatever,
Right. Well, she says the one more thing I wanted to hit, and I think she just kind of nails it, because she's also talking about the 35% of entrepreneurs. 35%. That's one in 3, almost 1 in 3 are immigrants. I mean, 8.1 billion they bring in just the entrepreneurs. I mean, that's cutting off your nose to smite your face, man.
You talk about the number of immigrant entrepreneurs in Florida. I definitely experienced that. I lived down there 14 years. You have a lot of people who own construction firms and restaurants, and these are people who are Latino, right? They are themselves, and a lot of them are Republicans and Desantis supporters and probably voted for him. I want to read a quote from the same article that quoted you in the New Yorker. And this was a quote from a gentleman named Jose Rodriguez, and he's a priest in the Iglesia Episcopal Jesus de Nazaret Church in Orlando. He said that conservative Latinos are prioritizing abortion over immigration and other life-preserving issues. Rodriguez, who supports immigration rights, added, they make a good show of pretending that they care about immigrants, but at the end of the day, they worship at the altar of conservatism, and they'll turn their back on their neighbor. What
kidding.
I've been seeing on these sort of TikToks that are putting up is people saying that a lot of people who actually voted for DeSantis and thought that he would be a good governor are actually waking up to the fact that this isn't helping them. Are you seeing that kind of reaction from Latinos?
So I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. We tend to be a little bit more on the conservative side as a whole. I do definitely believe, Jackson was a bit of a purple city, if you will, not quite blue like Orlando or what Miami used to be, prior to this past election. But I definitely think, so having this experience with, I've been doing immigration for 9 years, working in immigrations for 13 years. And I will tell you that particularly the Hispanic Latino immigrant, right? Because there's different types of immigrants.
Yes.
In Jacksonville, for example, we are a majority minority city. We have 6 to 7% Asian population, almost 11 to 12 Hispanic Latino, and 33 to 34 African American Black population. So we are actually a majority minority city, but our politics don't reflect that. Mm-hmm. But I having already seen a couple of election cycles here, right? What I can tell you is that the immigrant, particularly the Hispanic Latino immigrant, is not monolithic, right? They're not attached to one particular issue, and because traditionally people have, we come from countries where religion is a very strong, it has a very strong hold on our households. They tend to vote for things that don't necessarily protect their immediate interest. And so, and that's something that I started a nonprofit called Nefida, that we're trying to work to educate the immigrant population on, like, this is the way that our political system works.
So that was kind of what I wanted to get to. And that these people come from much more conservative backgrounds and conservative countries. So they're more likely to vote Republican. Right, but the Republicans have to placate to their base, who we know is got the white supremacists and the sort of the moderate racists who don't, right? And so, what do they end up doing? They have to attack the immigrants because they have to give their base something to feed. Oh, the immigrants are coming for your jobs. or Trump, they're rapists and they're murderers and they're coming for your daughters, kind of thing, right? And they have to play that game. And when it hits one of those things where it's like, you're sitting there thinking, God, Republicans, if you could just placate to the Latino immigrant base and give them something that they want, right? And help them out, you'd actually be in a position to compete with the Democrats. And this, instead you got, well, not anymore Tucker Carlson, but Tucker Carlson and a bunch of these guys talking about the replacement theory, right? That the Democrats want to bring over all these Latino and Hispanic people because they're going to replace the voting public, which is white, right? Because these people all vote Democrat, when in fact, she just pointed out they don't. Most of them don't. So it's one of those things where it's literally shooting yourself in the foot. These are constituents who probably voted for him, and now he's pushing them out of the state, pushing them out of work, for no other reason than they're immigrants. It's stupid. I just think it's crazy.
And brown.
Yeah, it's the color of their skin is the big issue. That's the main issue. Now,
I feel like we have to just, call a spade a spade, and they're afraid of brown.
Brown people, yeah. But you know what they're most afraid of in the world? People like me.
Everyone else becoming brown?
No, people like me, yeah. People that, white mother, Asian father. My mother's parents were not happy about that. I mean, they love me. They love me and everything, and they've got over it. But it's like, that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of the mixing of the races. And I'm sorry, but that happens in every single culture. There's no pure-blooded person anywhere on Earth. Ever. Right?
I mean, I come from Vikings.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what those Vikings did.
Well, you guys, yeah. You probably got some Saxon and some Celt and Well,
there could be some of anything in
oh
there
my God.
coming from Vikings. Anything.
You know, one of my favorite things was, and I thought this was so funny, when people do the DNA tests to find out and all
I'm freaked out by that. I'm totally not going to do that, but I do think it's interesting when other people do.
I did it. I mean, it was exactly what I expected. But a lot of people were kind of shocked that, like, and this is true, like a large portion of the population of the planet has some Mongolian in them. And for a long time, they were like, that's got to be a mistake, and da-da-da. There can't be that many people that have Mongolian ancestry. And it's like, well, no, actually, in the 1400s, when Genghis Khan and then his sons later ruled, those guys had so many children. Genghis Khan had, 800-something wives? And he had children with most of them. I mean, and then those kids had kids. And then, that's...
That's the dude that spread his seed, man. I mean, I hate to go using that phrasing,
That's
but...
true. And he conquered almost a fourth of the known world. He's the grand champion of conquerors. No one beat him. Alexander didn't even come close. I mean, so yeah, that guy. Yeah, there's
You had to be like, I'm wife 773.
Well, I mean, you're like, what? So when's my rotation? Oh, 2 years from now? Okay. I mean, so in the meantime, I get to just sort of hang out around the palace.
Wait a minute, you just say you skipped my day because of that concubine over there?
Ugh.
You're not even a wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, gee.
But anyway, I just think that's funny. But it's like, yeah. But people are always shocked. But yeah, there's a good chance you have some Mongolian DNA in you. Anyway, we're going to skip to the next DeSantis thing, which I think is really funny. So DeSantis got into a big conflict with Disney because he had the Don't Say Gay bill, right? And Disney kind of pushed back on him, even though Disney does tend to be a little bit more of a conservative corporation. They are still to have to play to a more progressive base or to a progressive audience, because that's what Hollywood is. That's what most moviegoers are, right? So they pushed back on him. He got into a big fight with them, tried to, take over the governance of the park and all this Disney World, right, which is in Florida, right? Well, this has all gone bad. Well, Disney decided to stick it to Trump, or not to Trump, to DeSantis, and then Trump thought it was funny. So this is what happened. So this is Anna Kasparian with the Young Turks, and she's going to go over this. This is pretty funny.
As the feud between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Disney continues, Disney has decided to finally pull a nearly $1 billion project out of the state of Florida. And they're doing so in order to send a very clear message that Ron DeSantis's political stunts and retaliation against Disney is not something that they're in favor of and not something that they will stand for. Now, no one is happier about this than Donald Trump, and he engaged in some proper dunking, which we'll get to in just a moment, so buckle up for that. But first, let's tell you a little bit about the nearly $1 billion project that Disney was planning on accomplishing in Florida. So apparently the $864 million office complex, known as the Lake Nona Town Center, was supposed to involve the relocation of more than 1,000 employees from Southern California. The complex would have brought more than 2,000 jobs to the region, with $120,000 as the average salary, according to an estimate from the Florida Department of Ed.
Can you believe that he... Who are his advisors? I want to know.
Okay, so, I mean, does it matter who his advisors are? Because I suspect he's not the kind of person who bothers listening to
I
them.
don't think he does. In fact,
I can't imagine anyone advising him that any of this has been a good idea.
Oh, no. But I think the big gag is... So... He's gotten this whole fight with Disney, and then Trump was making fun of him about what a screw up, and he's not a deal maker like I am, right? Got a deal. But what's really funny is this is all about the gay trans issue stuff. So he doesn't like trans people or gay people. He doesn't like immigrants, right? And the thing I think is really stupid about this, you get into this big fight with Disney World. Ron DeSantis got married at Disney World. Honey, you know the church where we got married? I'm going to burn it to the ground.
Wow.
Why? Because they let a gay person in there once. I do it all for you, honey. Oh, man. Anyway, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's... So, immigrants are fleeing. He just blew 2,000 jobs that averaged $120,000 apiece. That's some decent money. Decent money. So, yep. Florida is now becoming a cesspool pit of despair. It's going to be fun to watch what happens next. Well, anyway, let's see. We have time for... We'll do one more real quick. And then Elon Musk. You ready for some Elon?
Oh, man. We just got all the weirdos today, don't we?
All the weirdos. It's been like I said, this week was like racism week. So, anyway.
Okay, I know it doesn't mean anything to you, but Mercury is no longer in retrograde. It finally went in direct, and now all the weirdos came out of hiding or something? Is that what happened? I don't even know.
I think so. I think that's what happened. So, Elon Musk, here's an interview. So, he tweeted some stuff that was questionably racist. We're going to discuss it. I think it is, but we'll go through it. So, he tweeted some stuff about George Soros, and then that's the first thing that this guy's going to ask about. He tweeted some stuff about George Soros, who's a billionaire, and George Soros is also known for being more of a progressive kind of billionaire. He gives more progressive causes. I mean, he is more moderate when it comes to fiscal policy and stuff. But the thing about George Soros is also Jewish and a Holocaust survivor. So he gets attacked a lot by the right wing, where they're like, oh, George Soros did this, or George Soros has funded this, or he's corrupt, or all. Because what they're really saying is the Jews. And there's a reason I think Elon Musk goes after. There's two reasons that Elon Musk goes after him. But I want to show you this tweet here. So this is a guy from CNBC. So this is a financial journalist who's interviewing him. So it's not a comprehensive interview. It's a financial interview. So just go with it.
It's a terrible thing that happened. That's election interference.
But how do you make a choice? You don't see, I mean, in terms of when you're going to engage. I mean, for example, even today, Elon, you tweeted this thing about George Soros. Well, I'm looking for it because I want to make sure I quote it properly. But, I mean, you know what you wrote. But you basically...
It reminds me of Magneto. It's like, calm down, people. This is not like made a case out of it.
You also you said he wants to erode the very fabric of civilization, and Soros hates humanity. Like, when you do something like that, do you
I think that's true. That's my opinion.
Okay, but why share it? Why share it?
Okay, so
look at the look on Elon Musk's face right there when he's asked why share it. Like, it's never occurred to him that you could just like have a thought and leave it in your head.
I don't know what the issue is with him. I don't know if he's autistic but he's always seemed a little slow to me. I mean, it's not like he didn't create Tesla. He bought it from the two guys who created it. He bought Twitter. I mean, the guy didn't create anything. He's not a scientist or an inventor. He didn't come up with any of this shit. He just bought the companies. So he's not like he's a genius. And the companies he has now, he's pretty much driven in the ground, and he lost half his fortune in the process. And that's just been in the last, 6-8 months?
Yeah, he's had kind of an interesting, well, I'll round off and call it a year, but he's had a pretty interesting year-ish.
So, first reason I think he's pissed at George Soros is George Soros recently dumped all of his Tesla shares and bailed out. Not that George Soros owned a ton, but he was still a pretty fairly major shareholder. And George Soros basically said, I think it's a worthless investment at this point because it's tied to Elon's reputation, and his reputation's in the toilet. And so I think that's part of why Elon does that. Elon compares him to Magneto. Now, you probably don't know this. It's a comic book called X-Men. Magneto's like a villain sort of character. But in the comic book, I don't know about the comic book, but in the movies, the interesting thing about Magneto is an Auschwitz survivor. And he's fighting for civil rights for mutants, but he's doing it in a much more violent, aggressive way. As where the Professor X character is trying to do it in a more peaceful way. And the comparison...
like the classic civil disobedience versus self-defense method.
Right. And
social justice kind of idea.
Right. And the idea behind the comic book was Magneto's sort of the villain, but he's a sympathetic villain. And him and Xavier are friends. They get along, even though they have to fight each other over these issues. But the thing about it is the idea was Professor Xavier was representing Martin Luther King, and Magneto was representing Malcolm X. Kind of, just the persona-wise.
Sure, right. I teach a whole unit about civil disobedience, and both of those men are in it.
Oh, yeah. People always forget that Martin Luther King Jr. did a lot of civil disobedience stuff. Anyway, but to sit there and compare a Jewish Holocaust survivor to a villain who is also a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and not to make the connection. Of course he made the connection. That's what this... But the journalist isn't going to get that. The journalist is going to ask him, like he did, well, why would you share that? Because doesn't that affect your shareholders? Which is a good question, but it's the same point. It's like, let's look at the underlying thing about the question is, also what you said is pretty fucking racist. It's pretty anti-Semitic. But let's go back into this interview, because the interviewer is not going to jump into that.
In simpler terms, though, look at that look on his face. Drag him over here.
Yeah, here.
Look at that look on his face. Like, it has literally never occurred to him that he could just, keep a thought to himself.
No. We'll get into that in a second, too, because I have a theory about it.
Especially, why share it when people who buy Teslas may not agree with you? Advertisers on Twitter may not agree with you. Why not just say, hey, I think this. You can tell me. We can talk about it over there. You can tell your friends. But why share it? Why?
I mean, this is freedom of speech. I'm allowed to say what I want.
You absolutely are, but I'm trying to understand why you do, because you have to know it's got it puts you in the middle of the partisan divide in the country. It makes you a lightning rod for criticism. I mean, do you like that?
Plus, let's look at it this way. This is the thing the guy doesn't ask. If you're going to do it from a financial perspective, okay? You alienate your customer base. I am less likely to want to buy a Tesla if I think I'm supporting an anti-Semite. Because it's not going to be cool when I cruise up to the club in my Tesla and people...
Like, oh, that's a racist car.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, that guy's a fucking racist. Then you feel like, oh, I just spent $90,000 on this piece of shit.
They're going to be looking at you like a freaking Nazi or something because of your car, and you're not going to think that's great, especially not one that freaking expensive, ma'am.
Which is crazy because I could drive up in a Mercedes and nobody thinks I'm a Nazi.
Right, but you drive up in a Tesla, everyone's suddenly looking at you being like, is that dude like a Nazi?
Is he like an Elon Musk?
Black guy.
Yeah. So that would have been a question I'd ask. Is like you're that and your shareholders. First off, you're the CEO of a company. You have a contractual obligation to protect the interest of your shareholders first. Right? And if you're tweeting weird shit like that, and it's costing stock price to go down, I, as a shareholder, have a right to sue you for negligence of maintaining the contract. And I don't think he's thought of it.
I totally want to look at Tesla's stock price right now. I mean, it's Sunday. But
I don't know what it did this week. It's not been...
I don't either.
It's not been doing well, but he's tanked Twitter. I mean, Twitter's in the toilet. Anyway, but we'll go through this a little bit more because it does get a little bit worse, actually. I mean, this is what amazes me. Yeah, I do not think this guy's. I don't think he has the mental capability to run a company.
All right, Tesla's at
people today.
Basically what?
Is it what?
It's basically at 180. Its 52-week high though is 314.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, so let's see the past 1 month.
I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, it doesn't look to me like exactly what happened there has been. Which date was that?
No, it's tanked. They were at their peak in 2021 was 414.50. They're now at 180.14.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They were lower than that, though. The 52-week low was $101. So they're above their low, but they're significantly below their high. Way more below their high than above their low.
Oh, yeah. No, if you invested in Tesla, you lost over half your money by this point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Twitter's in the hole, too, isn't it?
Oh, Twitter's totally bombed out.
I used to be following Twitter. Did I remove it? I'm just trying to look for it. Apparently, I defollowed what Twitter stock was doing. It was doing so bad, I didn't even have it on a list of interesting things.
I don't even know that you can trade it right now. I think they took it off the list. Anyway, but let's go through the rest of this interview real quick and get this.
And you're saying he's an anti-Semite. I don't think you are.
No, I'm definitely not. I'm like a pro-Semite.
Yeah, that's why we're making Jewish remarks.
A pro-Semite.
I believe that probably is the case. Yes. But why would you even introduce the idea that would be the case?
I mean, look, we don't want to make this a George Soros interview.
No, God, no. I don't want to at all. But what I'm trying even came up though in the annual meeting. I mean, do your tweets hurt the company? Are there Tesla owners who say I don't agree with his political position and I know it because he shares so much of it? Or are there advertisers on Twitter that Linda Yaccarino will come and say, you got to stop, man, or I can't get these ads because of some of the things you tweet.
Okay.
I'm reminded of the scene in The Princess Bride. Great movie.
Great.
Where he confronts the person who killed his father. And he says, Offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care.
That's his response. I don't care. You don't care what the shareholders think.
I feel like you don't need a Princess Bride reference to say you don't care. I actually kind of thought we were going somewhere with that.
Well, and here's the funny thing. I've seen that movie like 1,000 times. It's a classic movie, right? He's talking about the scene where Inigo kills the guy who murdered his father, right? He's been looking for the guy for like, whatever it is, 15 years.
Offer me money, offer me power, offer me all these things.
Well, that's the thing, is when he's doing that, he's stabbing the guy and cutting him up and humiliating him and torturing him. When he's doing that, and he says, offer me money, and the guy's begging him, yeah. And he's like, offer me power, yeah. Offer me everything I ever want, right? And the guy's like, everything I have and more. And then the guy tries to make a move, and that's when Inigo finally runs him through and kills him. And the line he says isn't, I don't care. The line he says is, I want my father back, you son of a bitch. That's the line. It's the most famous line in that movie. And he fucked it up. And the thing about it is it's not that he doesn't care. It's that you don't have anything I care about. I care about hurting you because you hurt me. It's a fucking revenge plot. That's all it is. There's no morals. There's no goodness in it. That's just, you killed my father. Now I'm going to cut you up the way you cut me up, and I'm going to fucking run you through.
Well, I'm not going to lie, I feel like Elon Musk failed to make a point. Failing to make a point, Mr. Musk. Failing to make a point.
And misquoting. And the other thing about this is you got to remember, this guy, Elon Musk, he inherited or received a lot of his money from his father. His father owned, I think, was the largest emerald mine in South Africa during apartheid. So his father was essentially a slave owner. And that's how he grew up. And he grew up when his father's anti-Semitic. It's the same thing with like when people at Mel Gibson's father was an open anti-Semite. And you're shocked. This guy he's an acorn that didn't fall that far from the tree. He just is used to having money and buying shit and doing whatever the hell he wants. And here you have this financial guy trying to reason with him, like, well, think about your shareholders, think about your customers, think about your product. Think like a businessman. He's not. He's a little prince. Right? And that I don't care line gives it to you. It's that whole shit that Elizabeth I used to say, which is the law does not apply to princes. I can do whatever I want. Sorry, not in America in the 21st century. Well, I mean, Trump kind of disproves that, but still, it's like you're going to pay some price. But anyway, so that was our fun news segment on racism. We hope you all enjoyed it. There was more to that interview, but I don't want to get into because it's about white supremacy and it's not fun. Anyway, do you want to take a quick break and then jump into student loans? And we'll try and
let's do it.
Rush through them as quick as possible. We wanted to talk today about student loans, especially the student loan forgiveness stuff that's going on. And we're going to look at some videos and some articles about that just to give you some perspective. But right now, there are three main arguments against the student loan forgiveness that Biden's proposing, or any student loan forgiveness for the most part. The first argument is it's going to raise the debt and the deficit. This is not entirely true. To the deficit to a degree, but the debt, not so much. So we'll look at that. The other one is going to be, well, it's not fair to people that didn't go to school or already paid off their student loans. Right? We're going to dispel that one too, because that's not how things work. And three, the other argument is, why should I as the taxpayer, have to take on the burden of paying somebody else's student loans? Right? So those are the three main arguments, and all of them are kind of bunk. So if you agree with it, great. We're going to give you some tools. So if you get into this discussion, you have something to clap back with. to those talking points. And if you're for it, then yeah, leave us a comment if you don't like it or you disagree. But I think you're going to have to rethink your position on why you don't want it. So we're going to look at a video real quick because the Supreme Court's looking at it now for the Biden thing. But we're going to look at this video and we're going to dissect some of it because they break it down pretty well. So this is who is this? You sent this to me. This is CNBC. So we're going to watch this real quick.
And the burden of student debt is being lifted by President Biden, members of Congress who support it, and it is right. We ask the United States Supreme Court to believe in the certain inalienable rights.
So we can let an unelected body try to take away relief for our families that are struggling every single day, and the pandemic made it worse for them.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic, student loan borrowers have had a moratorium on their payments. The pause on federal loans has lasted over 3 years, but now over 40 million Americans may be hit with a bill some borrowers have never even seen.
So for years.
So here's the deal. For the last 3 years, there's been a moratorium where you didn't have to pay down your student debts. They just kind of froze them, right, because of COVID. So a lot of these kids that graduated in the last 3 years, 4 years, whatever, have never paid a student loan payment. And now all of a sudden they're going to get hit with payments that they're not expecting. So you're going to see a rise in defaults, deferments, all that kind of stuff. So that's one of those things. The other thing is a lot of people right now are in student debt. I mean, it's 1.8 trillion is the total amount of debt, or federal debt at least. These people are now going to have to start paying it again, which is going to harm the economy because that means these people are going to have less disposable income to spend. So there's an potential economic crisis or recession that could be driven by 44 million people now all of a sudden having to pay all this large bill every month, right? So that's part of what the concern is. So they're going to keep going through this. I just wanted to clarify that.
Years, advocates and borrowers have been pressuring the government to act on student loan forgiveness, saying the student loan system was broken. Outstanding student loan debt is marching towards $2 trillion. You have over 1 in 10 borrowers in delinquency or default, and a number of other issues with the lending system.
So I'm going to skip part of this. They're going to go into the cases here. There were 6 lawsuits. 2 of them made it to the Supreme Court. The others were shot down. So they're looking at standing or people actually being harmed by the student debt forgiveness. That hasn't really been established, right? The other is does the president have the power to do this? And he's declaring that he does under the CARES Act, the HEROES Act of 2003, which allows him to do this, especially in states of emergency. Right? It's just this is being done to a much larger extent. So there's a big question about that whole issue that the Supreme Court is hearing. Now, initially, the thought was the Supreme Court, since it's very conservative, would probably just shoot it down. However, what happened was during the initial hearings, there was rumors and a lot of indication that they felt that the attorney for the president made a much better case about why this was within his power and this was actually necessary. And that the others were just doing it as a political stunt, which is true. But she made a really good case for that, which is kind of shot down their whole plan here. But we're going to skip to this real quick. So here's I think this is going to be Jason Furman. Jason Furman was a White House economist, but he's going to talk a little bit about this and some of the negatives that he sees in it.
Debt relief plan is its impact on an already indebted economy.
I've been critical of student loan debt relief for the last 2 years, but the plan came in, frankly, much worse than I expected. And at this point in our economy, we really don't need to be adding
$500 billion of deficit spending for a purpose that, frankly, includes wealthy law students and business school graduates getting tens of.
So here's where I'm going to disagree with Jason Furman. He's a great economist, don't get me wrong. The estimate was $329 billion, but let's say it's $500 billion. Okay, that's $500 billion over 10 years, so it's $50 billion a year. Okay, not a big amount of money over a 10-year period when you think about it like that, right? On top of that, he's saying, well, it's going to go to wealthy people. Well, no, because in Biden's plan, it's means tested. So people making over whatever it is, 125,000, don't get it.
Right, 125,000. So, I mean, I guess if somebody went to law school and does not make over 125,000 for that, 100 grand plus they have in debt, they can have 10 grand of it forgiven.
Yeah, but you're talking about a prosecutor making 60 or 70,000 a year. You're not talking about a wealthy lawyer.
No. You might be talking about somebody like just starting out or something if they're going to be underneath that, if they're in one of those high earning professions, if they even, make the cut in the means test at all.
Right. So I think it's kind of
even if they do, it's a tiny little splash in the bucket compared to how much student loan debt they most likely have.
Yeah. It doesn't cover most of it, probably. Law school's expensive. The average law school's like $300,000. So yeah, $10,000. Oh yeah, thanks for the help. It's like your grandfather, like, here's a nickel, go get a soda. Yeah, Cokes are like $1.50, Gramps. So anyway, we'll go through this a little bit more.
Thousands of dollars.
So what the Supreme Court examined at the end of February are two major things. One, have the plaintiffs here actually proven that they've been harmed by student loan forgiveness? In order to challenge a policy in the courts, you need to prove that a policy has caused you injury. It's called legal standing. Do you have legal standing? The Supreme Court justices considered if the plaintiffs had proven that they will be harmed by student loan forgiveness. The other point that the Supreme Court was considering at the end of February is, does the president acting within his rights in forgiving this amount of student debt? While the Biden administration points to the HEROES Act as justification, the plaintiffs say that law allows for much more tailored relief than the type of sweeping debt cancellation the president is trying to carry out.
So, that's the basic issue behind this whole court case. Now, I want to look at more of it from the perspective of the arguments. So let's look at this. So the argument about taxes and like, why should I have to pay, my tax dollars have to pay for people's college, right? Or people's student loans. That's one argument. Here's the simple analogy, counter argument. Lacey, you don't have kids, right?
Correct.
Nor do I. So why do our tax dollars have to go to fund public schools? Why are we subsidizing other people's kids? We don't have kids. Why are we having to pay for that?
Right.
Do I approve of bombing in Yemen? Do you approve of bombing in Yemen?
No.
I don't approve of that. Why do my tax dollars have to go to that? Because that's how taxes work. It's collective. Right? Why do my tax dollars go to fix a rural road in some town I'm never going to go to? Because that's how taxes work. So this idea that, well, why should my taxes go to this? You don't get to choose where your taxes go, bro. It doesn't work that way. So that's just a stupid argument right there. The other thing that I think is really stupid is this idea that for somehow student loans don't already cost money. Not just to the loan borrowers, but to the taxpayers as it exists. So let's look at this real quick. I want to look at just statistics for student loan debt, and this is the Motley Fool. So 2019 is what they're looking at, okay? Their key findings. First quarter of 2019, there was an estimated 5.2 million federal student loan borrowers in default. Okay, so about 44 million or 40 million, right? Like she said, about 1 in 10 are in default. But 3.4 million are in deferment, which means they're not paying it now, but they have to pay it, 6 months, a year from now. And 2.7 million are in forbearance. but they're dealing with it, right? Then you get to 20% of student loan borrowers were behind with their payments. That's not including these this over 10 million here. Another 20% are behind because the payments are too high. So they're barely paying the interest or a little bit of the interest, so their debts are racking up, right? And so when you go through this whole thing, average student loan debt, and we can go through this, what I want to point out is here's the total student loan balance. 2004, it was $345 billion, and it's grown each year after that, as you can see. And then you get to 2017, it's 1.386 trillion. You get to today, it's about 1.8 trillion. So the total amount of debt grows every year, right? Because more people go to school and borrow money. And it takes people decades to pay it off most of the time. And they're only in school for usually 4 years, sometimes longer if they go to grad school, right? So the amount of debt is just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. It's not going to stop because it's not getting paid off quick enough. So the other question is, okay, if that's the case, then how much money are we making as a country on the debt? We should be making money on the interest, right? Because we loaned it out, we should be getting interest. Well, the reality is it doesn't work that way. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a second, but essentially what it is Lacey loans me $50, and I tell her, okay, I'll pay you back $60, right? And so I pay Lacey back the $60, but Lacey borrowed the $50 to loan it to me. That's how the government does it. The government doesn't just have a stack of cash that goes to loans. When the student loan amount comes in, they issue treasuries and take on debt and borrow it at interest. So Lacey owes $55 on the $50 she spent, right? Because she's got to pay that interest, but then I'm going to pay her $60. So she should still make it ahead, right? Except for Lacey doesn't have the ability to manage the loan. So she has to go through an intermediary, a lender, to do it for her. And they're going to charge her fees on that, right? And so they charge her $15 in fees. So now Lacey has to pay the $5 in interest plus $15 in fees. Lacey's got to pay $20. So when Lacey gets the loan back from me, the $60, right, my 50 plus the 10 interest, Lacey's got to pay out $20. So now Lacey's $10 in the hole from the whole beginning. This is what's been happening over the years. And it's just exponentially growing, which is part of the problem. So as we get into like this, I'm going to do here's where NPR did an article. The U.S. government underestimated the cost of the student loan program by billions. All right, so from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the Department of Education miscalculated the cost of federal student loan program. From 97 to 2021, right? So 24 years. Education Department estimated the payments from the federal direct loans, this is just the federal direct loans that they had, would generate $114 billion in profit for the government. What they actually found was it cost them $197 billion. So it's a $311 billion difference. They were supposed to make $114. It cost them $197. So they lost money. And that's just that one part. That's not all the different costs. That's just that one portion of it. Right? So the government lost money. So you as the taxpayer to sit there and go, well, my taxes shouldn't be going to pay your loans. They already are. You're paying the fees, the deferments, you're paying all that crap. You're paying for the interest. You're paying for it. I don't know what to tell you.
Don't let them pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah. So if you sit there and go, well, I shouldn't have to pay for your student loans, I agree. They should just be forgiven. That way you won't have to pay for them. Because the interesting thing is, all this is already accounted for and paid for. So if they're forgiven, it does not going to increase your taxes. It's not going to increase the debt. The only increase to the deficit is now they're not going to get the revenue they expected from it. But over the long run, they're going to save money. Right? So does Lacey keep giving me that same deal over and over and losing money every year? Because, well, she'll at least get the $40. Or does she just go, screw it, I'm just going to get rid of it now, so I'm not eating a loss every year? And especially a loss that's going to grow every year in perpetuity. Sometimes you just have to...
It's going to get worse.
Sometimes you just have to say, this is a bad investment, and I'm just going to have to suck it up and take my losses. Otherwise, it's
right.
just...
Like when you've got a losing stock in your portfolio, all right, you might hang on to it for a while and see if it turns around, but then at a certain point, it just keeps going down, 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 down. You just like, all right, man, cutting my losses, right? You don't hold on to it until it's literally in the ground.
Right. Well, if you bought a house that was underwater and that just kept costing you more and more money in repairs every year, wouldn't it just be better to just sell it at a huge loss and just get rid of it?
At a certain point, you might hold out for a little bit, but then you're going to go, all right, man, I just got to get rid of the loser.
Well, I think 24 years should tell you. Plus, like we said, it's going to get worse because a lot of these people are going to be paying it now for the first time or haven't paid it in a while. So there's going to be a lot more defaults, a lot more deferments. So even fewer.
24 years. If you were in a relationship with a person for 24 years and that was how the math was shaken out on the thing and it was just not a good relationship, you're probably going to cut your losses at a certain point, right?
Absolutely. I would say it's time to bail. Now,
time to bail.
I wanted to look at this one real quick. So Forbes did a thing about the pros and cons of college because of the cost, right? Now, the cost, I want to do this. We covered this before, and you can go back to our previous video, but in the 80s, the Southern strategy under Reagan, they wanted to try and reduce the number of minorities going to school and poor people. So it hurt poor people, whites, but it mostly hurt minorities. So what they did was they said, well, in the 60s and 70s, colleges were really, really cheap. And in some states, they were free. And the idea was, well, college education should be free, public education, just like public school. Because it's a public college, it's public school. The thought was, we need more educated people in this country to be competitive as a nation. So college should be free. It should be covered by the taxpayers, by the government. So in the 70s and 80s, you paid next to nothing to go to college. Why? Because it was mostly paid for. Now, these same generations, these Gen Xers and then the boomers that got most of their college paid for by tax dollars are saying, I don't want to have to pay tax dollars to pay off your loans. When what they did was, under their generations, the loans the amount of subsidies from the government got cut so much that the students had to borrow more and more and more. So we all got screwed. So the idea is college still, a good idea? Well, it's kind of a necessary thing considering now 75% of new jobs require college. But what I wanted to do with this article is they talk about how much does college cost and college planning. They do this. Why is college worth it? And these are just 3 reasons. College graduates earn more than non-graduates. That's a fact by a significant amount. It's almost double. Majority of jobs require college education. Like we said, 70% of all jobs will require some college education by 2027. 70% by 2027. Think about that. That's 4 years from now. Without some higher education, right? Even though it's just an associate's or a certificate. And college graduates are more likely to have health insurance because they're more likely to have jobs that offer it. And then they say 3 reasons why it's not worth it. You'll have a lot of student debt. That's the problem. Well, if we eliminate a lot of the student debt, then you won't. So we could take that problem away. The government could take problem 1 away, no problem, and get more people going to college. High-paying jobs aren't guaranteed. Well, nothing's ever guaranteed. And it could take more than 4 years to graduate. Well, that goes back to number 1. So now you're paying for an extra year or 2 years. I mean, it took me 5 years. Right? So I want to point out that the negatives to college can pretty much be eliminated just by fixing how we pay for it. Right? And, like we pointed out, it's a benefit to the taxpayers because now you're not subsidizing our loans all the time, which you're doing right now. Part of your paycheck goes to taxes. Part of those taxes go to subsidizing the fees in our loans. It's not reducing our loans. It's not reducing the loans of anybody. It's not putting more money into the economy. You know what it's doing? It's paying banks and lenders to stay in business. You look like you wanted to say something on that. No.
No, not on that in particular, no.
I mean, you'd be upset too. I mean, if 2% of your paycheck went to pay off some random lender every month, you'd be pissed.
Yeah, I mean, who's excited about that?
Right.
So nobody ever, right? Nobody's excited about that.
Nobody. So I'm going to get into the last bit here. So, last couple things. So, I like this article from Slate. This is a little bit older, from 2021. An extremely important statistic about student debt that has never been published. Now, here's part of the problem. Here's a question you might think would have been easy to Google answer. How much money does the federal government collect in student loan payments each year? So the journalist of this article tried to look it up. He's like, at the time, Joe Biden had just won, blah, 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 but it wasn't clear. Democrats in the Senate, da, da, da. So what he did was, how much money would borrowers take, blah, blah, blah. So what he did was, what was it? He asked about it, and he looked into it. He'd never seen the number, couldn't find it, and there's a good reason, which I learned as I emailed higher education wonks in Washington. The Department of Education does not actually publish straightforward figures tracking how much money it collects from borrowers each year. It also doesn't how much it costs, at least not useful ones. So the data the agency releases annually combines the regular principal, blah, blah, blah. So what he figured is the grand total was roughly around $70.3 billion for 2021. So that's what people paid towards their student loans. Now, most of that went to interest. Now, of that $70 billion, once again, it's the Lacey example. She got $70 billion, but then she had to pay of the principal. She had to pay interest, and she had to pay fees and all that. So Lacey didn't get all of her money back. The government didn't get all of its money back. And so who subsidized that? Tax dollars. But think about that, $70.3 billion. What if you forgave all the student loans? That's $70.3 billion in the pockets of those people, which means those people are paying higher taxes now because they're not deducting their student loan interest, right? And they have more money to spend. So that's money that goes back into the economy, creating more jobs, creating more tax revenue. So just profitably, just in a very cold-blooded, profitable sense as a tax collector, or as a taxpayer, it's in your best interest to just let it be forgiven. Because right now, it's just an ever-growing pit that you'll never fill. And more people are going to fall into it. And we're not going to have enough college graduates to fill the jobs that are required. Right? And so you're going to have more and more of these people that are unemployed or just not even looking for work.
Listen, I have a lot of students that are pretty hesitant about the idea of going to college because they just look at me and say point blank, I don't want those loans.
Yeah, but that's the problem is how are they going to get a job if in 4 years 70% of jobs require some college education?
Right, but the point is they're looking at it and they're like, well, within this lose-lose scenario, I pick not being saddled in the debt.
Right.
If we have a whole bunch of kids that pick that, then, look at the snowball effect that's going to have.
Well, and then what it does is what was sort of designed to do when they started cutting the amount that government would pay towards it is now it's only really for rich kids, which are mostly white. Right. That's what it's supposed to do. That's the plan. That was the plan in the 80s. And they just continued on with it. So I have one more argument to sort of back this up. So Mark Kantrovitz, if you guys don't know who this guy Mark Kantrovitz is, look him up. He's kind of an expert on student loans and how this works. So does the government profit off student loans? It's like, it should be simple. Does the government profit off student loans? Depending on who you ask, the federal government either earned a profit or lost money on federal student loans prior to the pandemic. The answer depends on political and accounting perspectives, right? But by foregoing nearly $5 billion a month in interest, the student loan program swung from a profit to a loss, even the most optimistic projections especially during the pandemic. So it's absolutely operating at a huge loss today, no matter how you spin it. Right? And so he goes into how you calculate it and whatnot, but the federal budget doesn't really explain it all that well. But he gives us the program costs are expressed as percentages. For example, a cost of 2% means the cost of federal government $2 over the life of the loan on a net present value basis for every $100 borrowed. So what he's talking about is what the cost is to the government to keep these things going. And then he shows the different projections and all how that. But he goes into this, which is important. Where does the money go? And like we said before, the loans are funded by issuing treasuries. They're not paid for in cash. They're paid for by government taking on more debt. Right? And that money's borrowed from investors. So they have to pay that back at interest. And there's also a fee paid to the U.S. Department of Education and Treasury to cover this, because they got to hire staff to do this. And then the loan servicers, right, which are private companies like Navient and Mojita and all those, they get fees to service these. And they've had lots of corruption and problems with not, giving up PSLFs and other forgiveness programs and things like that. And they've had a lot of things where they've misled students. So there's all this shit going on. And the reality is that you're not making the money. So to make this argument that it's not fair, right, is ridiculous, right? Of course it's not fair. It's not fair when Trump gave the $1.9 trillion tax cut to the rich and corporations. But I don't see any of these people bitching about that. But, some nurse gets a $10,000 student loan relief package, and everybody loses their minds.
Yeah. Well, let's talk for just a quick second about some of the student loan forgiveness stuff and how it impacts your wallet. Okay, we've been talking a lot about the Biden loan forgiveness,
right,
but what has not been getting a lot of attention, it deserves some attention.
Right.
So I'm going to throw it out there to you guys and ask you to do a little bit of your own Googling here. So if you remember back in, Duncan, I'm sure you'll remember because this is our time frame, the single-digit 2000s.
I'm not that old, Lacey. Yes, I remember back then.
All right, please let us know in the comments if you believe that Duncan is not that old.
The answer is yes.
I'm going to win that one.
Yeah.
I'm hands down winning that one for sure. Even if they think you're younger than that, they're going to side with me. So
it's the gray hair, isn't it? It's all the gray hair. That's gives a dead giveaway.
Right. When you do that to your head,
yeah, you can see. Yeah, I'm a little zebra.
Yeah.
Good. So early 2000s.
Anyway, so in the single-digit 2000s, roughly is when you could start getting these income-based repayments instead of the standard 10 years, right? Instead of here's your standard 10-year payment. You could choose from these varying options. And in the early 2000s, they implemented this rule that said if you're on an income-based repayment plan for, they set these markers as 20 and 25-year markers. If your balance wasn't paid off, they would become forgiven.
Right.
Well, what would happen back then, and it happened to me, for one, is I consolidated my loans in order to get a lower payment. But every time you consolidated them, they started your clock back to zero. So every time people consolidated to try to, get lower payments, get better interest rates, to finagle that portion of this whole situation, their clocks would get set to zero. Well, right now, as with the public student loan forgiveness, where people have been getting credit for more accounts, people that are under the income-based repayment plans that have nothing to do with public student loan forgiveness, that are looking for the 2025-year forgiveness, they're getting more credit for their payments too. So if this is you, if you were one of those people like me that was consolidating at various times back then, the reason I keep bringing up this consolidation, one of the things they're going back and giving people credit for are the payments they made before consolidation. They're basically unraveling that whole it resets to zero thing. So some people are going to have the opportunity to find out that their student loans are actually done. So people are supposed to be seeing that in action this summer if you're one of the people that, you know, it brings you to completion and brings you to total forgiveness. You're supposed to see that sometime this summer. Other people should see their accounts updated, you know, through the rest of this upcoming year. But it'll, for them, it'll move them closer to forgiveness. So even while we're waiting for this stuff happening in the Supreme Court, there's still more things happening with the payment counts and credit people are receiving behind the scenes. So that's kind of one of those things to keep an eye on the news for. If you do some research, you can find articles on it, but it's not what's being publicized as much. So you kind of have to keep an eye out for yourself and be looking at your own student loans to see if you're getting updates there.
And you need to check on that. And the other thing is income-based repayments. Like Lacey mentioned, if you can get that, that's probably one of the best ways to go, unless you want to pay off your debts earlier, and then you just pay more money. But if you're on the income-based repayment plan, it's based on your discretionary income. And that's going to go down some. Plus, what's going to happen, too, with the Biden deal that is not being challenged, which I think is great, is as long as you're paying your minimum payment every month, whatever that is, you cannot accrue interest on top of your loan. So if you borrow, like now, if you borrowed $25,000 and you just paid what you could and you couldn't pay off the interest, your loan would grow. And so all of a sudden you'd be 5 years later, you'd be looking at like, oh, wow, now I owe $32,000 because interest payments or interest you didn't pay off, right? Now that's going to stop going forward under the Biden plan. So if you owe $25,000 and as long as you're making your minimum payment, you will never owe more than that $25,000. So those are all, I mean, those are all good things, but you got to check on this stuff and be diligent because the loan servicers like Navient and Mojita that do the lending, that we pay our tax dollar fees to, they're not going to tell you. Not willingly. So that's just, I think that's a good point. But yeah.
It's one of those things that's not getting nearly enough attention, but it impacts so many people's wallets to be aware of this and to be looking for this and to be diligent. Also, there's another thing, because I do my homework on this one because nobody cares more about my wallet than me. And I have found, you know how you call in and for various things they will give you like a 1 month forbearance and that sort of thing.
That'll tack on interest, yeah.
But additionally, those are not being given back to people when they're doing the recounts unless you have more than a certain number of months of it. I believe it's like 36 months of deferments and forbearance. If you just got forbearance for a month here and there, they're not doing that. But what you can do is you can register a complaint. You can register a complaint and have that reviewed to get credit for it if you believe that you were advised into an unnecessary forbearance. I will probably do so because I believe I got put into one not wanting to because they would allow you to change your due date. I wanted to change my due date because I didn't want my rent or mortgage payment on the 1st to also be when my student loan payment is on the 1st. You don't want your two biggest payments coming out of the same paycheck when you have a tight budget, right? You would rather have one of them come in the middle of the month if you're paid twice a month. But in doing that, I was forced onto these 1 month forbearances that I'm not getting credit for, even though I didn't want that. So I'm pointing this out. You might have it for different reasons than I did, but my research has indicated that you can actually get them to give you credit for it, but you're going to have to do the homework yourself, and you're going to have to register a complaint, because they're not just going to go back and give you that one unless you had enough months consecutively. You're going to have to register a complaint and literally complain, stating that you believe that you were pushed into this or advised into this when it was not useful to you to get credit for it.
Right. Remember, when you call the lender service companies, right? It is not in their interest to reduce or lower your payment or forgive your loan, because then they lose money. They would rather you keep it. So there's this kind of a problem with that. So I want to do this one quick thing and wrap up. So we're going to try and do this as a short video. We'll see if I succeed or fail. I'm going to try and do this in under 2 minutes. You ready to try it?
Sure.
Okay. So, we looked at the arguments and stuff, right? So here at Gossip Finance, right, which you can catch us on YouTube, we like to look at some of the stupid arguments. And so we're looking at the stupid arguments for why student loan forgiveness is a bad idea. And you've probably all heard this argument. We mentioned it before. But here's Dave Ramsey to make it for me.
A guy who's a welder and a guy who's a truck driver and this gentleman I just met who's a police officer, they shouldn't have to pay off your student loan debt, which is, by the way, your student loan debt, not mine. And I'm a taxpayer. And if it is forgiven and paid by the taxpayers, that means I paid off your student loan debt.
So that's the stupid argument. Okay. Now, I'm going to cut through this because I'm going to try and make this shorter. So let me give you 3 reasons why that's a stupid argument. Okay. First off, will it increase your taxes as a taxpayer? Only if you're receiving loan forgiveness. And that depends on the state you're in. And, of course, you'll lose the loan interest deduction. So, no, it's not going to increase your taxes unless you're getting it. 2, Dave's college costs. Is it fair? Is it right that I have to pay it? Well, when Dave graduated from college, his annual tuition and fees were $289 a year. That's about $1,282 a year in today's dollars. The student today going to the same university pays $13,374 a year. That's 10.4 times more today than Dave paid. And why did Dave pay so little? Because most of his college was pre-subsidized by the government by taxpayer money. So most of Dave's college was paid for by taxpayers. So now all of a sudden that he has to open his wallet and pay it forward, now he's pissed? Interesting. 3, taxpayers, you're already paying on our loans. Why? Because the government has lost $197 billion in direct loans since 1997. So that means the taxpayers, you, me, everybody else, are paying the fees, interest, and defaults on everybody else's loans every year at a loss. The net number increases every year as more and more people take loans. So it's just an ever-expanding pit of money that us, the taxpayers, are paying. So just to sum it up, will it increase your taxes? No. Is it fair? Yeah, because the boomers and Gen Xers got mostly free college, or pretty close to free college, 10 times more than the average person today, for at least Dave here. And 3, you're already paying on our loans anyway. So yeah, I agree with Dave. You shouldn't have to be paying on our student loans. They should just be forgiven. So if you like that, check us out at Gossip Finance at YouTube. So that, I think, was I can cut that. But yeah, I think that was a pretty good clip. But that's my summation. I think it's a simple argument. Simple argument for that one stupid talking point.
There you go. How do you like them apples? I don't know. I can't afford any apples. I'm too busy making my student loan payments.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Where can everybody catch you, Lacey?
All right. As always, you can catch me at mysensewithsense.com. You can look me up for articles, workshops, courses that I am running or will run in the future. Feel free to write into us if you want information about that. If you have any clips or topic requests, we're currently exploring some different topics that we're curious about. So send them to us at our email address. Duncan, what's that?
Yeah, our email is gossipfinancead@outlook.com. If you want to schedule a time to, like, if you disagree with us, call in. We can schedule a time to bring you on. Just let us know at the email. Other than that, hopefully we'll get phone lines up and maybe we'll do some live stuff in the next few months, but probably not this summer. No, we're too busy. We're too good looking. We got to be at the beach.
We're going to be summering.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on my swimsuit bod all winter, so don't have time.
We will not feature that in a video. We will spare you all.
We'll spare you all. We'll spare you all. Thanks, everybody, for watching. All right, good stuff.